Night tears itself into ribbons of white. Wind scours the ridge, spraying needles of snow across a circle of trampled ice. In its center, a starving fire claws upward, thin and stubborn. Frank Dalton braces beside it, coat ripped open, breath smoking like a furnace gone cold. Beyond the flame, wolves drift through the storm, eyes catching light, bodies vanishing between gusts. Behind him, under the rock lip, a great shape heaves and settles. The mother bear crouches over newborn warmth, fur steaming, flanks trembling from effort and blood loss. The pack tightens, reading weakness and heat. Powder hisses under their paws. Gunfire ghosts the valley from far off, a metallic echo promising a second predator. Snow hardens into glare, sparks snap and die midair. Everything narrows to 3 pulses. Fire, wolves, cubs, beating against the dark like nails against a coffin lid. Mercy and danger share the same breath and refuse to yield. Hours earlier, winter swallows the trail whole. The forest leans under weight. The sky hangs low, colorless and heavy. Frank sinks to his knees at a bulge of snow fused to a broken pine. Beneath his glove, the drift has the give of flesh. Ice cracks along a seam, exhaling a hoarse, secret breath. He scoops with numb hands, skin burning, nails scraping glassy frost from fur clumped to the ground. A paw emerges, black pads filmed with rime, claws dulled by ice and fatigue. The mound shudders, then falters. Air rasps somewhere inside, thin and failing. He carves at trench, pries the neck free, breaks the beadwork of frozen breath from a sealed muzzle. Heat rises faint as a candle behind stone. The belly is swollen under the crust, round with a geometry that is not hunger. Snow erases his prints even as he digs. Life presses upward from a grave the storm keeps refilling.
The hollow becomes a furnace the size of a heartbeat. Smoke knots beneath rock, then slides along the ceiling in slow, dark ribbons. A fistful of tinder accepts a coal and blossoms to flame, painting stone in copper and the bear's fur in wet gold. Air tastes of sap, iron, thawing earth. The great body shivers, muscles rippling in waves that build and break. Contractions roll through her like distant thunder. Moisture beads and runs, mapping veins across the floor. The first cub slips into cold air, small and slick, a spark blinking against extinction. Warmth gathers around it, the mother's breath, the fire's tongue, the cave's trapped heat, until sound pierces the blizzard's roar, thin and undeniable. Another surge answers, then another. 3 fragile rhythms join the storm's drum. Outside, wolves braid their voices with the wind. Inside, fire and blood strike a pact. Creation arrives without ceremony, defiantly alive in a world built to kill. Dawn never comes in this storm. The world only pales from black to iron. Frank crouches by the fire, smoke and steam twisting together until his eyes water. The bear lies collapsed beside her newborns, chest rising in uneven tremors. Frost has bitten through her ears and along the line of her spine. He feeds the flame with splinters stripped from his walking stick, the wood snapping like bone. Each crack startles the cubs into silence, then back into their blind mewling. Heat creeps outward, fighting the cold that seeps through stone. The storm's voice dulls, replaced by dripping meltwater. Frank's muscles lock from exhaustion, but still he watches the slow rhythm of her breathing, the thin cord between life and stillness. Outside, light falters behind a wall of white. Nothing moves. Yet the fire persists, small and tireless, stitching warmth into a night that refuses to end. When the wind finally thins, he steps into a silence so vast it hums. Trees bow under ice, their limbs fused in pale armor. The valley lies buried, a single woundless sheet. Frank gathers branches by touch, testing each with frozen fingers until the bark cracks. His breath leaves a chain of ghosts that trail toward the cave. Somewhere below the ridge, wolves answer one another with long, searching cries. He lifts his head, listening, not to fear them, but to learn the distance. The air tastes of iron and cedar smoke. He turns back toward the hollow, wood piled high against his chest, snow spilling down his collar. Behind him, paw prints sink into his own, doubling the path in silence. The forest watches, without color or mercy, its patience older than prayer. The fire accepts its tribute of fresh wood and flares in gratitude. Light crawls across the cave, finds the bear's flank, the slow rise and fall that now steadies. Her cubs root blindly along her belly, their movements soft, relentless, hungry. Steam coils from her nostrils in steady rhythm. Frank sits with his back to the stone, eyelids half closed, listening to the pulse beneath the crackle. His body aches for rest, but his mind won't release its vigil. In the glow, he studies the slope of the bear's ribs, the scars hidden under new thaw, the faint ripple of muscle as life reclaims its hold. He realizes that the cave, once a tomb, now breathes. Every exhale from the fire returns as warmth across his face, every flicker a reminder that he is not alone in the world's indifference.
Night crawls back without warning. The wind shifts and returns with teeth. Outside, the horizon bleeds snow from east to west. Frank seals the entrance with branches and packed frost, leaving a small slit for smoke. The flame shrinks to an ember's heartbeat. Inside the narrow light, the cubs sleep in a heap of twitching fur. The mother's eyes open, two embers mirroring the fire's glow. For the first time, she moves her head, scenting him, measuring distance. Her breath is a whisper through the dark. Frank doesn't stir. Between them hangs the fragile understanding of shared survival. When the gusts batter the mountain again, they face the sound together, the beast and the man, both too tired to fear, both bound to the same thin thread of heat and will. At dawn, hunger speaks first. The cubs squeal and paw for milk. The mother responds with a low, rumbling breath that steadies the cave. Frank's stomach knots. He has nothing left except the bark he burned. Outside, the snow glitters cruelly under a sun that offers no warmth. He descends into the trees, following broken limbs and the faint track of hairs. The forest floor creaks under ice, air sharp enough to draw blood from his throat. He moves slower now. Every step counted against strength. A flash of movement, a rabbit darting under roots. He waits, breath frozen midair, then strikes. The sound is brief, absolute. When he returns to the cave, the smell of blood arrives before he does, carried on his sleeve, like confession.
The fire turns redder when the meat touches flame. Grease hisses, smoke threads the stone ceiling. The bear lifts her head, nostrils flaring, but she does not rise. Her eyes follow his hands, calm, questioning. Frank roasts a portion for himself, then cuts another piece smaller, nearer to raw. He slides it toward her on a flat stone. Steam curls between them. She stretches, jaws closing around the offering, teeth never touching his skin. The sound she makes is not growl but breath, rough and low. The cubs stir, sensing sustenance through scent. He eats what remains, each mouthful heavy with guilt and gratitude. Firelight paints both figures the same color, smoke and ash, warmth and need. Creatures equal in hunger, equal in reprieve. Snow thickens again by nightfall, muting the forest's breath. The hollow glows faintly from its single slit of smoke. Inside, time loosens its grip. Minutes dissolve into the steady crackle of wood and the heartbeat of flame. The bear shifts closer to the warmth, her bulk forming a wall against the cold. Frank leans back, legs stretched toward the coals, fatigue wrapping him like another layer of frost. Between them, the cubs murmur in sleep. The air smells of char and fur, of earth thawing one heartbeat at a time. Beyond the cave, wolves pass unseen, leaving only silence in their wake.
Snow covers every trace until even the path to the fire disappears. For the first time since the storm began, the night holds no threat, only the fragile sound of two breaths keeping each other alive.
The storm weakens, but never ends. Morning drips through the cloud cover like melted steel. Frank steps outside, boots cracking through crusted snow. The forest stretches in silence, a landscape of bruised light and frozen breath. Trees tilt under frost, their bark glimmering with ice veins. He follows the faint echo of his own heartbeat through the stillness. Somewhere behind, the bear's low rumble threads through the wind. An anchor, a warning, a pulse of belonging. He finds fallen branches hardened into glass, wrestles them free until splinters score his palms. Each movement sends sparks of pain that keep him awake, real, present. When he turns back, the trail has vanished under drifting snow. For a heartbeat, he fears he's lost the way home. Then, from the wind's hollow belly, comes the thin whimper of cubs. Sound alone pulls him back through the blur, toward fire, toward the fragile kingdom of survival he has built. By evening, the light folds inward, pale and exhausted. Smoke crawls from the cave's mouth, curling into the fog like a wounded ribbon. Inside, the fire flickers over stone blackened by soot and melted frost. The bear sleeps, ribs shifting with shallow rhythm, her cubs pressed against her like living embers. Frank tends to the coals, his shadow stretching long across the wall. His hands shake from hunger, but he feeds the flame before himself, watching sparks leap, die, and vanish. The sound of the storm has softened to a distant hum, a heartbeat beneath the mountain. For a moment he closes his eyes and imagines the forest thawed, green, alive. But when the wind returns, sharp as bone, the dream collapses into smoke. Only the cave remains, a fragile world stitched together by light, blood, and the thin endurance of two survivors bound to one another by need and mercy.
The next day breaks in amber haze. Frost crystals hang suspended in the air like ash. Frank wakes stiff and aching, limbs reluctant to move. The fire has dwindled to a memory, but warmth lingers, an aftertaste of survival. He crawls toward the mouth of the cave and looks out over the white abyss. Wolf tracks lace the snow, winding between the pines, circling, watching. They never cross the clearing. Something older than fear keeps them at distance, as though the mountain itself protects what sleeps here. He gathers fresh snow in a tin cup, melts it near the coals, and drinks the faint taste of earth and ash. The bear stirs when light touches her flank, her breath steady, her cubs shifting against her side. Frank's heart slows. For the first time in weeks, silence feels less like warning and more like peace carved painfully from the bones of winter. The world contracts to routine: fire, water, food, rest. Frank counts time by the length of branches, the burn of hunger, the movement of cubs. They grow restless now, their small paws exploring the boundaries of stone. The mother watches with amber eyes half open, her power returning one heartbeat at a time. Frank keeps his distance, aware that the balance between them is fragile, borrowed. Each night he listens to the forest breathe, a long exhale through needles and ice. Wolves call from the valley, but their song has changed. It's no longer hunger, it's recognition. He sits closer to the fire, head bowed, knowing he's become part of the story the mountain tells itself when no one is listening. Survival has turned sacred. The line between man and beast has blurred into warmth, and for the first time, he feels the weight of belonging to something beyond himself. Wind returns, sudden and sharp, slicing across the ridge. The entrance to the hollow breathes frost with every gust. Frank stacks stones tighter around the gap,
leaving only a slit of light. The flame fights back, sputtering against the draft. The bear shifts, uneasy, nose lifting to scents carried by the storm. Her cubs whimper and burrow deeper into her fur. Frank senses movement outside, branches cracking, snow collapsing, not from weather, but from weight. The air changes, heavy with a musk that isn't wolf. Something larger drifts near, unseen. The storm masks its sound, but not its intent. He grips the stick beside the fire, though he knows wood means little against muscle and hunger. The wind howls through the slit and extinguishes one ember. In the dark pause that follows, even the cubs fall silent, as if the mountain itself holds its breath, waiting to decide who remains by dawn. Snow muffles everything but the heartbeat of tension. The cave feels smaller, walls bending inward with every gust. Frank holds still, listening through the noise. Outside, a crunch, deliberate and near, the drag of weight through crusted snow. Then silence again, stretched thin enough to break. He waits for movement, for sound, for choice. When nothing comes, he exhales, the vapor trembling in front of his face. The bear's breathing slows, her head sinks. He understands that the forest is full but merciful tonight. Whatever watched has passed. He feeds the fire again, coaxing it from red to gold. The cubs stir and resume their quiet search for warmth. He watches them until exhaustion wins, until the storm's voice becomes lullaby. The last thing he sees before sleep is the slow rise of the bear's flank, a rhythm steady as the earth, proof that life has not yet surrendered to winter's patience.
Dreams blur with waking. Frank hears footsteps, human this time, mixed with the brittle rattle of metal against wood. He rises fast, heart stuttering. Morning light glints on the snow outside, a reflection not born of sun, but of glass and iron. The air smells of smoke that isn't his own. Men move between the trees, their shapes blurred by mist, rifles slung, boots biting into frost. He lowers himself beside the fire, every muscle rigid. The bear senses it too. Her ears twitch, her breath sharpens. The cubs remain still. Voices float faintly, curses, laughter, the careless rhythm of hunters who believe themselves alone. Frank realizes the fire's smoke has betrayed them, a thin gray column pointing directly at life. He sprinkles snow onto the coals, choking light into darkness. Silence returns, fragile and deliberate. Outside, footsteps approach the ridge. The mountain prepares to test what mercy can truly cost. The sound of men fades, then returns closer, weaving through wind and distance. Frank crouches near the entrance, watching shadows stretch over the drifts. They move in lines, purposeful, scanning for tracks. Their coats bristle with frost, faces hidden behind scarves, movements impatient. One stops, pointing toward the faint trace of smoke that clings to the rock. Frank presses back into shadow, heart pounding against bone. Behind him, the bear lifts her head, nostrils flaring. A low vibration trembles through the cave, too deep to be growl, too ancient to be fear. The cubs stir, sensing danger that language cannot name. The wind rises again, pushing snow across their prints, blinding the world in white. For a heartbeat, the hunters hesitate. The mountain shifts, groans, releases another veil of falling ice. Sound devours sound. When silence clears, their shapes are gone. The storm, once enemy, has become guardian.
Afternoon drifts into ash-colored dusk. Frank rebuilds the fire slowly, each spark a promise whispered to darkness. The bear rests again, her breath steady, her cubs warm against her chest. Outside, the snowfield lies untouched, though he knows eyes watch from somewhere unseen. Every shadow could be a rifle, every gust a whisper of pursuit. Yet fear no longer rules him, only purpose remains. He checks his meager supplies, a knife, some bark, the tin cup blackened by soot. Everything else is borrowed from the mountain. As night takes hold, he feels the weight of endurance settle over him like snow on branches, silent, heavy, inevitable. The flame steadies, climbing back to gold. Smoke curls upward, thin but sure. It carries his scent, his defiance, and his confession to the stars unseen above the storm. The forest will remember this warmth long after footprints are gone. The world outside freezes to stillness again. Trees stand like statues of bone. Wind drags pale dust through their ribs. In the cave, heat ripples faintly, painting ghost colors on the walls. Frank sits upright, fighting sleep. He hears the cub's tiny breaths, the rhythm soothing, innocent. The mother's flank rises and falls with a slower grace now, no longer desperate. Her wounds are healing beneath the fur, sealed by warmth and time. He realizes he has begun counting their breaths instead of his own. Somewhere beyond the trees, wolves call to the horizon, their voices neither threat nor greeting, but declaration. The mountain answers with thunder buried deep in ice. Frank watches sparks drift upward and vanish, small lives ending in light. For the first time, he understands that survival is not victory. It's participation, the steady heartbeat that refuses to let the silence win.
The fire fades to its bones. Frank feeds it with the last of the branches, watching sparks chase each other into darkness. Smoke folds upward, tracing invisible cracks in the stone ceiling. The air hums with quiet. Outside, the storm has gone still, leaving a silence so pure it sounds like glass about to break. The bear sleeps with her cubs curled tight against her flank, breath rising in slow clouds. Frank leans back, head resting against rock, eyes open to the faint shimmer of frost catching firelight. His mind drifts between memory and dream, farm fields buried in fog, a face he can no longer recall. The cave smells of musk, ash, and thawing earth, a scent that feels almost human. For a moment he forgets the world's distance and lets warmth claim him. The mountain breathes once through the wind, a sigh of temporary mercy, then everything stills again. Gray light filters through snow clouds, washing the valley in ghost color. The storm has broken, leaving shards of blue between the clouds. Frank steps out, eyes watering from the sudden glare. Snow lies deep, unmarked except for faint circles where wolves have patrolled. The cold has sharpened. Sound travels far. He can hear the trees settling, branches releasing their burdens with slow groans. The bear remains within, hidden but alive. He kneels, scoops a handful of snow and lets it melt in his palm, watching it trace thin rivers down his wrist. The world feels lighter, but not safer. Change is never kindness here. It is only permission to continue. He shoulders his pack, scanning the tree line. The horizon stretches clear to the ridge where the crowds still burn. Beneath all that brightness, the silence waits, vast and indifferent, ready to erase whatever dares to move. By midday, the sun reveals the full ruin left by the storm. Fallen trunks line the slope like bones, bark split open by wind. Frank moves carefully among them, listening for the creak that betrays hidden weakness. Each step sends echoes down the valley, sharp as broken glass. The air smells of sap and smoke, the taste of survival still raw in his mouth. He collects twigs and dry moss from the undersides of logs, building small bundles against his chest. Behind him the hollow looms half hidden by mist, a scar carved into the mountain's side. He pauses to look back, to mark the direction, then continues down to the stream. Water moves beneath a skin of ice, whispering secrets to no one. He crouches, breaks the surface, and drinks. The cold stings his throat awake. For a moment the world seems endless again, until the silence folds back over it. The first hint of movement comes from the far ridge, a flicker of shape, too deliberate for the wind. Frank freezes, eyes narrowing against glare. Through the white glare, he catches the rhythm of motion. Men, trudging in formation, rifles glinting. Their figures pulse in and out of sight as fog unravels between the pines. He retreats into shadow, crouching behind a fallen trunk. The bear's cave lies less than 100 yards uphill, invisible from below, but not immune to discovery. His pulse quickens. He watches the hunters pause, consult something unseen, then resume their climb. Snow shifts under their weight, slow and deliberate. Frank's breath clouds in front of him, a signal he cannot hide. He lowers his head and waits. Somewhere behind him, wolves howl, one short note answered by another. The men stop again. The forest seems to lean closer, holding its breath to see what follows.
Dusk slips in early, painting the slopes in gray. The hunters move like stains through the snowfield, slow but relentless. Frank returns to the hollow, each footstep deliberate, leaving no mark too deep. The fire inside burns low, its glow a trembling heartbeat across stone. The bear's eyes open as he enters. She senses the shift in the air before sound confirms it. He kneels beside the flame, adding wood without thought. Smoke thickens, clinging to the ceiling. Outside, the last light dies. A faint metallic click echoes from the trees. A rifle readied, a decision made. Frank closes his eyes, listening for pattern. The cubs whimper, restless under their mother's chest. The night stretches thin between calm and calamity. Every heartbeat is borrowed time. The wind drifts in, carrying the human scent of oil and fear. The mountain, patient until now, prepares to speak in thunder. The first gunshot shatters the ridge. Sound rolls through the valley, knocking snow from branches in a glittering avalanche. Frank ducks instinctively, though the bullet passes far above. Wolves answer with their chorus, the forest erupting in confusion. The bear rises, muscles tensing, nostrils flaring. Her cubs press into her side, small bodies trembling. Another shot follows, closer this time, ricocheting off rock near the cave mouth. Frank grabs a stone and scatters it into the fire, sparks bursting into a brief curtain of light. For an instant, the world is frozen mid-breath. Firelight, snow, blood, silence. Then motion returns. The bear roars, the sound filling the hollow and spilling into the storm. It is both challenge and warning, the language of a force too ancient to fear rifles. The hunters hesitate. Somewhere in that pause, the wolves begin to move, their shadows closing the circle.
The forest becomes a theater of echoes. Gunfire snaps, branches splinter, wind screams through gaps in the cliffs. Frank crouches behind stone, the air thick with powder and snow. He catches glimpses of movement, men darting between trunks, flashes of metal, a wolf's tail disappearing into shadow. The bear lumbers forward from the hollow, her roar colliding with the wind, shaking the ground. Wolves circle the clearing, using chaos as cover. Frank knows he cannot stop what has begun. He grips his walking stick, now cracked and blackened from fire, and crawls toward the entrance. Smoke rolls past him, thick and acrid. The hunters retreat slightly, shouting to one another through the noise, unaware of how close death has come. The snow beneath them shifts as wolves tighten formation. The valley no longer belongs to man or mercy. It has awakened, and everything inside it answers the same call. One of the hunters breaks rank, slipping on ice as he reloads. His shout cuts through the storm, brief and human. A gray shape blurs past him, silent, efficient. The rest scatter, firing blindly into the wind. Frank watches from the hollow's edge, torn between dread and awe. The bear moves again, a force of mass and muscle, her claws tearing furrows through crusted snow. She doesn't chase, she drives, pushing intruders away from the cave. The air trembles with her roar. Wolves dart in and out, ghosts in the half-light, finishing what mercy won't. The storm takes the sound and spreads it across the mountain, a chorus of retribution. Frank shields his eyes against flying snow, the world reduced to flashes of fire and shadow. When the echoes fade, silence falls so suddenly it feels staged. Only wind remains, sweeping away footprints, erasing the record of judgment delivered.
Smoke lingers in low curls, heavy with the scent of iron. The snowfield is scattered with the wreckage of struggle, rifle pieces, torn fabric, dark stains already freezing to black glass. Frank steps out slowly, body trembling from cold and aftermath. The wolves have gone, their work finished, their prints fading into the drift. The bear stands motionless near the tree line, head lowered, breath visible in slow bursts. Her cubs cry faintly from the hollow. She turns and returns to them, each step dragging through deep snow. Frank kneels, presses his hand into the ground where warmth still seeps upward. He doesn't pray, the act feels too small. He simply waits as the air clears, as the storm finally exhales. Above him, the clouds split and moonlight pours down, silver on ruin, peace over chaos. Nature has settled its debt. The mountain watches, unblinking, indifferent, but momentarily still. By morning, the valley glitters as though nothing ever happened. Snow smooths every scar, the landscape immaculate again. Frank sits outside the hollow, wrapped in his coat, face turned toward the light. The bear sleeps within, cubs nestled against her, their soft whimpers merging with the wind's rhythm. Smoke rises gently from the dying fire, a final thread connecting what lived and what survived. The hunters are gone, erased by storm and mercy alike. The wolves' distant song drifts across the peaks, neither mournful nor triumphant, only true. Frank closes his eyes and listens. The sound fills the spaces where words once were, where fear once lived. Around him, the mountain gleams, endless, eternal. For a long moment, there is nothing but breathing, man, beast, and wilderness, bound by the same fragile warmth that refuses to die, even in the heart of winter's cold perfection. Light creeps slowly through cloud and smoke. Frank wakes with a shiver, joints aching, hands blackened by soot. The air tastes of iron and thaw. Inside the hollow, the bear stirs, slow movements, deliberate and heavy. Her cubs crawl over her side, small shapes trembling with life. The world outside has gone still, the silence that follows a scream. Frank rises, feeding the fire with the last bits of dry bark. Each flame that catches feels like defiance. The wind presses against the entrance, testing, but finds no weakness. He steps closer to the mother, studying the pattern of her breath. Blood clings to her fur in faint streaks, half frozen, half healed. The cubs mewl softly, finding warmth. His pulse slows. The storm's chaos fades into the steady rhythm of recovery. For now, death has withdrawn its claim. The mountain holds them in uneasy peace, waiting for the next motion to break it. The valley below glitters in weak light. Mist coils through the trees, wrapping the world in secrecy. Frank moves outside again, boots sinking into new snow that gleams like wet glass. The air has changed, softer, carrying the smell of thawing wood and char. He kneels at the stream where the ice broke during the fight. Water hums beneath a thin crust, whispering through cracks like breath beneath a door. He cups his hands and drinks, the cold biting his tongue, anchoring him to the present. Above, crows gather in a black line along a dead tree, silent witnesses to everything the storm erased. The forest has no memory for mercy or sin. It accepts only what remains. Frank stands, looking toward the ridge where the hunters vanished. The mountain seems taller now, its silence heavier. Every scar of survival, man-made or natural, has already begun to fade under the snow.
Afternoon bends toward gold. Sunlight slants through the trees, striking patterns across the snow. Frank returns to the hollow, carrying the remnants of his courage in the form of firewood and melted snow. The bear lies still, her eyes half closed, a rhythm of exhaustion and recovery. The cubs tumble beside her, clumsy with new strength. Steam rises from her body, haloing her in ghost light. Frank builds the fire again, careful, patient. Sparks leap into the air, catching briefly before vanishing. The warmth spreads across the stone floor, lifting mist like breath. He studies the light shifting across her fur, the soft pulse under her ribs. The silence no longer feels heavy, it feels earned. Beyond the cave, snow falls lightly again, no longer hostile, but ceremonial, nature's slow act of closure. He breathes deep, the air heavy with musk and smoke. For a heartbeat, the world feels almost forgiving. Night gathers in layers of blue and gray. Frank sits near the fire, his face flickering in its uneven glow. He has stopped counting days. Time feels circular now, the same silence repeating with different colors. The bear dreams, her breath deep and rhythmic. The cubs twitch beside her, chasing invisible forests in sleep. Outside, wind sighs through the pines, no longer howling but whispering. Frank unwraps his bandaged hand, studies the healing scars, cracks filled with ash, edges stiff with frost. Pain lingers, but it no longer commands. He replaces the cloth and leans back, eyes unfocused, staring at nothing. Smoke rises, soft and steady, threading upward like thought. The storm's violence has receded into memory. What remains is waiting, without purpose, without fear. The cave's walls hold their heat. For the first time, he realizes that survival is less a fight and more a quiet agreement with the cold.
Dawn breaks thin and silver. The valley mirrors the sky, a sheen of ice over quiet water. Frank steps outside, boots crunching over frost. His breath clouds before him, dissolving into the still air. The world smells of pine and renewal, faint but certain. Behind him, the cave exhales smoke, thin, unwavering, a pulse of persistence. He scans the horizon, finding no trace of men or wolves, only emptiness wrapped in light. The sun climbs, slow and reluctant, painting the snow in faint rose hues. Each ray feels fragile, a thing that could break if looked at too long. He stands still, letting warmth seep into his skin. The silence presses close, not hostile, but immense. Every sound, ice cracking, wind shifting, belongs again to the earth. He realizes the mountain has resumed its rhythm, and for the first time, he moves in step with it, unafraid of the stillness. By midday, clouds begin to thin, meltwater trickles from the ledges, tapping rhythmically against stone. Frank sits near the fire, feeding it sparingly, conserving what little remains of dry wood. The bear opens her eyes fully now, the gold within them catches the light. She watches him, unblinking, aware but calm. Between them lies a quiet understanding, a boundary shaped not by fear, but by recognition. The cubs wrestle near her belly, their soft sounds blending with the hiss of burning sap. Frank exhales, feeling weight leave his shoulders. The cave smoke drifts toward the exit, curling upward, disappearing into blue. The air smells almost clean. He tilts his head back, letting fatigue fade. Outside, the wind shifts again, bringing the scent of wet soil, thaw, and distance. The season itself seems to breathe, the mountain inhaling after months of restraint. Life, slow and quiet, begins to move again. He walks the edge of the ridge, marking his return to the world. Below, the forest stretches wide, thaw lines cutting through snow like veins. Each tree glistens with meltwater, sunlight threading through in trembling gold. Frank stops beside a broken pine, runs his hand along the bark. The wood is warm. He hasn't felt warmth in months that wasn't fire. Birds call sporadically, testing their voices. The sound feels foreign and necessary. He smiles without knowing why. When he looks back toward the cave, smoke still rises, a signal to no one, proof that something endured. He adjusts his coat, shoulders squared against the wind, and begins collecting branches again. His movements have slowed, deliberate and sure. Every step writes itself into the snow, temporary but certain. The world feels fragile, stitched together by sunlight and breath. For now, that is enough. For now, the silence is kind. Evening comes painted in soft gold. The air glows, mist rising from the forest floor in lazy curls. Frank returns to the hollow with his gathered wood. The bear lifts her head, the cubs blinking at the dim light that spills in behind him. He sets the branches down, feeds the fire, and watches it rise again. Steady, amber, patient. Shadows play against the walls, turning the cave into a living thing. The mother lowers her head and exhales. The cubs settle back into her fur. The rhythm of their breathing matches his own. Outside, the mountain's outline blurs in fog, its sharpness dulled by thaw. The sound of water deepens in the ravines. He realizes the storm has given back what it once stole: movement, breath, the language of the living. He sits in the glow until the fire sighs low again. The night smells of smoke, milk, and quiet survival.
Days blend into one another. The ice thins, rivers stretch and break open. Frank wakes to light instead of cold. His hands, once cracked and bleeding, have begun to heal, skin tightening like new bark. The bear moves with ease now, her gait slow but sure. The cubs explore the edge of the hollow, curious, fearless. Their paw prints mark the snow before melting to nothing. Frank watches them from the fire, the faint smile on his face hidden behind his beard. The sound of wolves carries faintly across the valley, not threat, but acknowledgement. The world has learned his scent, accepted his place. He feels the mountain shifting toward spring, the air softer, carrying distant sense of growth. Each breath fills him differently now, less struggle, more belonging. He feeds the fire one last time, the flames rising steady, golden. The silence that follows feels like reward, not sentence. Night settles warm for the first time. Stars appear through the clearing fog, sharp and near. Frank lies beside the dying fire, eyes tracing constellations he can barely name. The bear sleeps near the entrance, her cubs pressed close, their tiny forms rising and falling. The wind moves gently through the trees, carrying the scent of pine resin and thawed soil. He listens to the rhythm of it, the deep, slow breathing of a world no longer in pain. Smoke curls upward, weaving into the starlight, until both become indistinguishable. Frank closes his eyes, the earth solid beneath him, the air soft against his face. The fire flickers, one last flame bending into ember. Somewhere in the distance, a wolf howls once, long, low, and final. The sound fades into peace. For a heartbeat,
Man, beast, and mountain breathe together, bound by the simple grace of having survived.
The morning breaks gentle, a pale wash of gold across the valley. Snow softens into mist, and the edges of the world blur. Frank rises stiffly, stretching each limb until pain yields to motion. The bear is already awake, nosing her cubs toward the light. Steam rises from her fur as the first sunbeam finds her. He watches in silence, a witness to something wordless and complete. Outside, water drips from ledges, each drop echoing like a clock restarting. The forest exhales. He steps out into the thaw, boots sinking in wet snow, breath white but fading fast. Birds call, tentative, stitching sound back into the world. Behind him, the cave breathes smoke, a last ember still burning. The air smells of wet bark and rebirth. For the first time since the storm began, the mountain seems to forgive. Each sound, each color arrives as if newly invented. Frank follows the stream downhill, the path lined with thawing roots and patches of dark earth. Meltwater rushes beneath the ice, impatient to be free. His reflection wavers in the current, gray, lined, alive. The forest around him hums, small noises awakening from months of silence. Insects tapping bark, branches shifting, unseen wings brushing air. He kneels by the water, fills his cup and drinks. It tastes clean, cold, almost sweet. The sun warms the side of his face, faint but real. Above, a hawk circles lazily, its shadow sweeping the snow. He feels the ache of hunger return, but not the despair. The mountain offers enough now, small life under logs, roots waiting to be found. He smiles at the simplicity of it. Behind him, faint and far, the bear's low call rolls through the trees. Not fear, not warning, just presence. The world has found its rhythm again.
The day stretches long and quiet. Frank gathers wood from fallen trunks, his hands no longer stiff, fingers moving with ease. The bear and her cubs venture beyond the cave's shadow, their paws leaving prints that fill with meltwater. Each step they take glitters in sunlight before vanishing. He watches from a distance, cautious but calm. The cubs tumble in the snow, learning balance, their cries high and bright against the hush of thaw. The mother moves slow, patient, every motion deliberate. Frank feels something shift inside him, a weight lifting, not from escape, but from acceptance. The air vibrates faintly with warmth. The snow at his feet begins to collapse into water, soaking through his boots. He doesn't move. He wants to remember this, how quiet can feel alive, how stillness can mean safety. The world no longer demands from him. It simply lets him exist within it. The valley breathes again. Mist drifts between pines, golden with sun. Frank walks through it, his cane tapping rhythm against melting ground. The air smells of soil, wet bark, and smoke fading into wind. He passes the places where the hunters fell, now nothing but smooth, unbroken snow. No trace of violence remains. The forest has absorbed its lesson. The mountain has no interest in memorials. He pauses, listening to the faint trickle of thawing streams. Insects hum low near the roots, the first sign of renewal. A shadow crosses overhead, a wolf moving along the ridge, pale and silent. It stops, watching him. They hold each other's gaze across the distance, acknowledgement without claim. Then it turns, vanishing into the trees. Frank exhales,
the air warm in his lungs. The balance restored, man and wild now equal under the same sky, neither master, neither prey.
By midday, the thaw deepens. Snow melts in slow rivers down the slope, carving lines of silver through black soil. The bear and her cubs have moved further into the forest, their shapes dissolving among trunks and shadow. Frank watches them go, an ache blooming quietly behind his ribs. Not sorrow, but something larger, undefinable. He knows she will not return, and that her departure means he has done enough. The fire inside the cave burns low, its smoke curls into air that no longer punishes. He steps out fully, sunlight pressing against his face, eyes narrowing from the brightness. The wind carries scents of moss and mud, the early pulse of spring. Each breath feels heavier, richer. When he looks back, the cave seems smaller, as if it never could have held all that happened inside it. Nature folds its miracles into silence, leaving only warmth behind. He walks along the ridge where the valley widens into river. The snow thins, replaced by pools that mirror the sky. Each reflection trembles under the passing wind, scattering the image of clouds into ripples. Frank stops to rest, leaning on his cane. His breath drifts upward, mingling with mist. The air hums with insects now, faint but constant. Life is returning in layers, color after color. The forest smells of sap and smoke. A crow lands near him, black feathers sharp against the thawing earth, tilts its head and flies off again. He smiles faintly. Movement is everywhere. Behind him, the mountain still gleams white at its peaks, holding the last memory of winter. Below, the river runs fast and clear, carrying snowmelt toward unseen seas. The world has resumed its endless cycle, but for once, he doesn't feel small within it, only part of the turning.
Afternoon stretches into amber light. Frank returns to his cabin, the door half buried in snowdrift and ivy. The roof sags, but stands. He pushes it open, hinges groan in protest. Dust floats through the slanting sunlight, each particle shimmering like a ghost of warmth. Inside, the air smells of pine and abandonment. His old tools rest where he left them, handles warped, iron dull. He sets his pack down, sits by the cold hearth and breathes. The silence here feels domesticated, human. He gathers the driest wood, strikes flint, and waits for the first spark. Flame blooms, small and golden. Smoke curls toward the chimney, staining cobwebs gray. Heat creeps across the room, reclaiming it from emptiness. Outside, snow drips from the eaves, ticking rhythm against wood. Frank leans back, eyes half closed, hands stretched toward firelight. The home he fled now feels like shelter earned. Evening descends in colors too soft for memory. The forest darkens, not with fear, but with calm. Frank sits by the open window, the fire murmuring behind him. The air smells of ash and early rain. Through the glass, he sees the distant hollow, barely visible, a shadow among pines. Smoke no longer rises from it. The mountain has sealed the story away, its silence absolute. He imagines the bear and her cubs far beyond the ridge, following the thaw into new valleys. The thought carries warmth. He takes a slow breath, listening to the heartbeat of wind against the cabin walls. Every creak feels like a reply, the world breathing around him. His reflection in the glass merges with the forest's fading light. Age, solitude, survival, all softened into one shape. Outside, a wolf's call threads through dusk. The sound no longer summons fear. It sounds like belonging.
Days slide quietly into one another. Frank repairs the cabin roof, patches holes, gathers rainwater. The rhythm of work feels sacred, each act simple and deliberate. The forest outside has changed. Green buds burst through soil, branches tremble under returning birds. He rises with dawn, sleeps when light fades. Hunger has turned gentle now, a reminder of living, not deprivation. Sometimes he stands at the edge of the ridge and looks toward the cave. The snow there has melted completely, leaving only rock and shadow. He smiles, imagining the bear's tracks long erased, her cubs grown, the wilderness untouched by human story. The air hums with insects, bees tracing slow arcs between blossoms. Life repeats itself, beautiful and relentless. He closes his eyes, inhaling the scent of sap and rain. The mountain hums beneath him, vast and alive, a soundless hymn to endurance. Spring arrives full and unapologetic. The valley bursts with green, rivers flashing silver through the pines. Frank walks barefoot outside, the soil cool and damp. Grass bends under his steps, springing back as though refusing to remember weight. He pauses by the stream, watches fish dart beneath the surface, their scales catching light like mirrors. The air smells of pollen and wood smoke from his hearth. He kneels, cups the water, and splashes his face. The cold shocks him into the present. Somewhere above, the cry of an eagle ripples across the sky. He follows it with his eyes, a dark shape rising higher until it disappears into sun. The mountain behind him glows faintly, its last snow melting into rivers. He stands quietly, heart steady, gaze fixed on the horizon. The world, fierce and forgiving, has kept him. In its vast rhythm, he has finally found peace.
Morning spills over the ridge like liquid glass. Mist clings low to the earth, trembling with hidden light. Frank wakes to the sound of water rushing beneath the cabin, streams that were once frozen veins now running free. The air smells of pine sap and soil, clean and sharp. He steps outside, barefoot, the ground soft beneath his feet. Dew pearls on grass, clinging to his ankles. The forest hums with sound, small wings, flowing water, branches stretching into warmth. He breathes deeply, his lungs expanding without the sting of cold. Behind him, the chimney exhales a thin thread of smoke, steady and calm. Every part of the valley feels new, as if winter had been a fever and this morning its slow recovery. He walks toward the ridge where sunlight gathers, his shadow stretching long behind him, bound to the earth he once feared and now understands completely. The forest has changed color. What was white and gray now glows green and gold. Ferns rise from black soil, dripping light through their leaves. Frank moves through them slowly, cane tapping against roots, each step careful but assured. The scent of moss and wet wood fills the air. The river roars nearby, wide and alive, its voice louder than memory. He kneels at the bank, runs his fingers through the current, feeling its cold pulse against his skin. In the rippling reflection, his face looks unfamiliar. Older, yes, but calm, eyes steady as water. The past months blur like snow carried downstream. He closes his hand, watching droplets fall back, merging into the whole. Nothing here remembers the violence. The forest forgives by forgetting. He stands, wipes his hands on his coat, and listens to the river's endless hymn of movement, life flowing without pause or destination.
That evening, the light deepens into amber. Shadows pool beneath the pines, cool and soft. Frank gathers firewood, though the air no longer demands it. Habit, not need, guides his hands. Smoke curls from the chimney, twisting upward through golden haze. He sits by the doorway, watching the sky bruise into purple. The mountain's peak glows faintly, a blade of white against fading light. From the valley comes a rustle, branches shifting, leaves brushing against unseen fur.
He looks up in time to glimpse a figure moving through trees. A bear, darker than shadow, slower than memory. Two smaller shapes follow close behind. They move without fear, without hesitation, silhouettes folding into dusk. He doesn't rise or call out. He only watches until they vanish behind mist. The fire pops once inside, a single spark flaring before quiet. The forest closes around the moment, keeping it sacred and unnamed. Night falls warm and silent. Stars scatter across the sky, bright as frost, but gentle. Frank sits near the fire, its reflection dancing in the window glass. The forest outside hums, a low symphony of water, wind, and distant wings. He feels time moving differently now, not forward, but outward, spreading like light across a still pond. The bear's image lingers in his mind, her shape carried into dream. He imagines her moving through new valleys, cubs grown strong, their breath misting in foreign dawns. He smiles faintly, a quiet acknowledgement that life continues beyond sight. The fire sighs and settles into embers. He leans back, the wooden chair creaking under his weight. In the stillness, he senses the heartbeat of the mountain beneath the floorboards, slow, steady, eternal. Each beat is both memory and promise, the sound of survival learning to become peace.
Morning brings rain, not snow, not sleet, true rain, warm and cleansing. It patters softly on the roof, dripping through cracks, tracing silver lines down the glass. Frank opens the door, lets it wash over his face. The scent is overwhelming. Earth, ash, and something sweet, the perfume of renewal. Puddles form quickly, each ripple catching fragments of sky. He steps into the mud, feeling it give beneath his soles. The forest around him drinks greedily, every leaf trembling in delight. A flash of movement, deer crossing between trees, heads high, unafraid. He laughs under his breath, the sound swallowed by rain. Everything feels lighter. The world no longer demands his vigilance. He stands there for a long time, soaked and unguarded, until cold seeps in again. When he returns inside, his footprints trail behind him like a signature, proof that even the earth remembers those who learn to stay. The days that follow pass quietly. Rain fades into mist, mist into sun. The valley thickens with color, green so vivid it hums. Frank tends to a small garden by the cabin, planting roots he once kept for tea, now for life. Soil darkens under his nails, the smell of growth anchoring him. The river below sings without pause, its voice both near and infinite. At night he sits outside, a blanket over his shoulders, watching fireflies drift like errant embers. The forest no longer looms, it welcomes. Wolves call sometimes from the high ridges, their notes soft, almost affectionate. He answers by listening, a conversation of silence and trust. Each day begins with smoke, ends with starlight. The rhythm is simple, ancient, enough. He no longer fears what he can't control. The wilderness, once a wound, has turned into pulse, steady, eternal, part of him.
Late one afternoon, he walks beyond the familiar trails, following the curve of the river to where it widens into marshland. The ground is soft, glistening with pooled sunlight. Birds move in quick flashes above the reeds. He finds an old tree half fallen across the water and sits, cane resting beside him. The air hums with insects, rich with scent. He looks across the shimmering expanse and sees distant movement, brown shapes grazing along the opposite shore. For a heartbeat, he thinks they are memories, but they are real, alive, thriving. The bears, perhaps not the same, but descendants of the story carved into this land. He feels no ownership,
only connection. The river reflects his image beside theirs, man and nature mirrored in motion. A breeze ripples the surface, blending both shapes into one. He exhales slowly. The forest no longer watches him, it breathes with him. When night falls, fog rolls back into the valley, thin and silvery. The moon hangs low, turning every drop of dew into glass. Frank returns to the cabin, fire flickering low, its glow reaching only the threshold. He stands at the doorway, watching mist drift between the trees like smoke from unseen fires. The sound of water, steady and distant, fills the spaces between thoughts. He feels neither old nor young, just present, balanced at the center of something vast. He sits by the window, hands clasped, eyes half closed. The air moves softly, carrying the scent of pine and rain. Outside, a lone wolf's cry rises and fades, answered by another farther away. The harmony stretches through the night, a chorus of distance and belonging. He smiles, eyes heavy, the fire reflecting in his pupils. Peace has weight now, and he carries it easily.
Dawn seeps in pale and quiet. Mist curls above the fields, lifting slowly as the sun climbs. Frank steps outside, breath clouding once before vanishing. The world smells of rain and smoke, the soil dark and shining. He follows the path down to the stream, watching it shimmer under the first light. The water runs clear, carrying petals and fragments of leaves. He kneels, touches its surface, feeling its constant movement, never still, never hurried. In its reflection, the mountain glows behind him, silent and immense. He whispers nothing, yet the silence feels full, complete. Above, ravens trace slow arcs across the sky. Each wing beat pulls the morning wider. The cold no longer bites. The forest, once a labyrinth of threat, now feels like home. He stands, the sun warming his face. Every breath he takes now belongs to the earth that once tried to take it away. Evening settles like a closing hymn. The horizon burns gold, then softens into blue. Frank sits beside the dying fire, cane resting across his knees. Smoke drifts upward, carrying the last scent of pine into cooling air. The valley below hums with unseen life, frogs, water, wings. He watches the mountain fade into dusk, its outline blurred but steadfast. A breeze passes, brushing his face, and he closes his eyes. The sound of wolves drifts once more, distant, gentle, unthreatening. The forest responds in whispers. He breathes deeply, letting it fill him. Memory, pain, mercy, all dissolve into the same steady rhythm. When the fire finally collapses into ash, its glow lingers faintly in his eyes. The stars appear one by one, reflections of embers reborn. The world exhales. The man remains, quiet, whole, part of the wilderness he once defied, and in its mercy, the wilderness keeps him.